The first time I realized something was wrong, I was halfway through a video call with a billion-dollar client, pitching a cybersecurity package, when the screen froze. Not a harmless hiccup, no. This was the type of glitch that makes your stomach drop. The frozen frame was Mel Blink, mouth open, looking like a stunned goldfish. My client bailed after the third interruption. I hadn't just lost a pitch, I lost a $50,000 contract because my internet decided to take a nap in the middle of a deal I'd been working on for months. I stormed into the living room, router in hand, already muttering technical curses, when I saw my download monitor spiking like a heart attack chart. Someone, or something, was bleeding my bandwidth dry. And that's when I saw it, multiple unfamiliar devices connected to my network. All of them traced back to the same source, the roof. My roof. That was the moment I whispered the words that would spark the war. What in the freshly microwaved hell is going on up there? I live in a quiet, too clean for its own good HOA community, where everyone waves fake smile hellos and files real complaints behind your back. I knew the kind of people I was dealing with, clipboard warriors, anonymous note leavers, and the kind of woman who thinks petunias are a personality trait. But even in a place where people measure lawn height with a ruler, I wasn't prepared for what I found on my own rooftop. It wasn't just a device or two. There were 3 large, professionally installed Wi-Fi repeaters bolted into my roof tiles, humming happily, blinking away, siphoning off my hard-earned high-speed internet like greedy little goblins. I nearly fell off the ladder. At first, I thought maybe they were some sort of utility installation, a city program, maybe a shared community project. But no one had told me anything. No signs, no permissions, not even a passive-aggressive flyer stuck in my door with bad clip art. Just unauthorized tech hanging out above my living space like it paid rent. I grabbed my phone, took pictures, recorded video, and immediately marched down to the HOA office, ready to cause a scene worthy of a reality show reunion episode. Karen Davenport, the queen of the HOA, was seated behind the desk like she was presiding over a courtroom instead of a desk with expired peppermints and a bowl. She was wearing a pastel cardigan, and that look people get when they think they're in control of a situation. I stormed in, phone in hand, and before I could even speak, she smiled with the serenity of someone who had no idea a tsunami was coming and said, yes, Mr. Eli, we were meaning to let you know about the new community connectivity program. We've installed Wi-Fi boosters on key rooftops in the neighborhood. You've been selected as one of our central hubs. Selected, as if I'd won a sweepstakes. I asked when I had agreed to this, because last I checked, my roof was not available for public lease. Karen, cool as a cucumber in winter, slid a piece of paper across the table like it was an ancient contract. I looked. It was a general notice, printed on standard paper, dated 3 months ago, and never delivered. It hadn't even been mailed. It had been posted to the community bulletin board, which I later found out was a dusty corkboard behind the HOA building, next to the dumpster. According to Karen, the lack of response implied consent. When I pointed out that this logic was somewhere between laughable and legally insane, she chuckled and said, "Oh, Eli, you're such a tech guy. You'll be fine." That's when I knew 2 things. 1, Karen had no idea what I actually did for a living, and 2, I was about to become her worst nightmare. See, what Karen didn't know was that I wasn't just some neighborhood IT nerd. I used to design classified network security protocols for government contractors. These days, I consult for companies that pay more for a single firewall than she probably makes in a year. I monitor digital breaches for fun. I'm the guy companies call when someone halfway across the world is trying to hack their entire infrastructure through a printer port. And this woman decided to piggyback her HOA's Wi-Fi repeater system through my personal network like it was some kind of open buffet. I walked out of that office without saying another word, not because I was done, but because I was just getting started. The first step was surveillance. I needed to understand just how bad the breach was. I traced every MAC address connected to my network, mapped the bandwidth use over time, and built a detailed report. What I found made my jaw drop. Over a dozen households were siphoning off my signal, streaming video, gaming, uploading ridiculous amounts of data. I even found someone mining crypto on my network. The entire eastern side of the neighborhood was essentially using my house as the central data node for their digital freeloading. And the cherry on top? They'd wired the repeaters directly into my power line. They were stealing electricity, too. I stared at the data, then looked out the window at the calm, sun-drenched suburb, and started to laugh. A slow, disbelieving, incredulous laugh that turned into something manic. These people really had no idea. They thought I was going to unplug the cables and call it a day. They thought I was going to grumble, maybe file a complaint, and wait 6 months for someone to look into it. But I wasn't going to do any of that. I was going to hit them where it hurt most, in their wallets, in their TikTok connections, and in their HOA-approved sense of order. They wanted bandwidth? They were about to pay for every byte. And when I say pay, I don't mean metaphorically. I fired up my laptop, cracked my knuckles, and began writing what would become the most beautifully passive-aggressive splash page in digital history. It would look official. It would seem like a standard provider update. And once they clicked agree, they would essentially be signing into a system that tracked, billed, and throttled every kilobyte they consumed. But that was just phase 1. This wasn't just about getting even. This was going to be fun. The first thing I did after setting the bait was give it a name, Operation Bandwidth Clampdown. It felt appropriately petty, ominous, and just techie enough to sound like something from a spy movie. I wasn't just going to cut off their Wi-Fi. I was going to charge them for it. After all, if they insisted on using my roof for their signal, then why not treat it like a premium service? But to make it work, I had to be surgical. One false step, and they'd notice something was off. Karen would storm back into my life with another nonsense legal threat, and the HOA would circle the wagons. No, this had to be subtle, at least at first. I began by building a fake splash page that looked like a genuine provider agreement update. It had the right colors, the right fonts, even a little fake logo I whipped up in Photoshop called Skyfiber Enhanced. It was triggered the moment someone connected to the repeater signal. To the unsuspecting residents using the free Wi-Fi, it just looked like a routine policy update, something no one ever reads. Except this one contained a clause, small and buried deep, that said users agree to pay 27 cents per megabyte consumed after 50 megabytes per day. And since I had access to the repeater traffic, I could track everything. Every video streamed, every download, every ridiculous data-draining TikTok marathon. It worked faster than I expected. Within the first 24 hours, the page had already logged 10 separate acknowledgements. I had names. I had IP addresses. I had data. More importantly, I had digital consent. I set up automatic invoices, each one sent from a freshly registered business email for my shell company, Data Link Utility Services. It sounded just professional enough to sound legit and just vague enough to avoid suspicion. The bills weren't enormous yet. The first wave of invoices went out the next day, $50 here, $100 there. Enough to sting but not enough to cause immediate rebellion. And just to sprinkle in some chaos, I sent one directly to the HOA treasurer, Mr. Harold Tompkins, for a clean $186.42. He paid it without question. The real comedy began when Karen herself received an invoice for $212.90 and marched back into the HOA office, demanding answers. Except this time, she wasn't angry at me. She was angry at the new provider. She thought the HOA had signed up for some shady service without telling her. I watched the whole meltdown unfold via a hidden repeater cam I had rigged up for monitoring. Karen, waving the invoice in the air like it was a bomb threat. Harold, defending himself with vague mutterings about vendor trials. It was digital theater, and I had a front row seat. But just as I was getting comfortable in my villainous little throne, the HOA struck back in their classic, predictable way, paper citations. I woke up one morning to find 3 letters taped to my door. One was for unauthorized rooftop equipment. The second, for non-compliant electrical routing. The third, and my personal favorite, was for public endangerment through unstable antenna deployment. Which was hilarious, considering they were the ones who installed the antennas in the first place. It was petty. It was ridiculous. And it only fueled me more. Rather than respond directly, I decided to escalate quietly. I started digging into HOA regulations, the bylaws, the power use agreements, the digital rights clauses. You'd be amazed how vague and outdated most HOA tech policies are. They were written in a time when the biggest digital threat was someone stealing cable with a wire hanger. The rules were so laughably out of touch that I realized I could practically write my own interpretation, and no one would understand it enough to fight me on it. That's when fate handed me the perfect wildcard, Ms. Penelope Baxter. She lived 2 doors down, rarely spoke, always wore oversized gardening hats, and was generally assumed to be a harmless retiree. Turns out, she was anything but. She knocked on my door one evening, holding a glass of lemonade, and said, "I saw what they did to your roof. They did the same thing to mine back in the day. But they didn't know I used to work for the FCC." I nearly dropped my drink. Penelope wasn't just a bored retiree. She was a retired federal compliance officer who had spent 30 years auditing illegal frequency use and unauthorized equipment installations. And when I showed her pictures of the repeaters and explained what they'd done, her face went cold. She muttered something about unlicensed hardware, code violations, and jail time, and then asked if I had more detailed specs. I invited her in, and within 10 minutes, we were reviewing repeater logs, transmission reports, and energy consumption graphs like 2 hackers plotting a heist. She was loving every second of it. And I was loving having a surprise ally with the legal teeth to bite. But it didn't stop there. With her help, we discovered something even more damning. The repeaters weren't just using my internet. They were tapping into my electrical grid. The installation had been done by one of the HOA's preferred contractors, who had conveniently spliced into my line to save cost. That meant I was footing the electric bill for every bit of traffic that passed through their system. All those hours of streaming, all those late-night gaming sessions, every gigabyte pulled was burning my kilowatts. So I decided to play a little prank. I built a program that injected a 6-minute reset loop into the repeater's firmware. Every 6 minutes, the signal would drop, reboot, and log the event. It created chaos. Kids were screaming at Fortnite. Parents couldn't stream their shows. Smart devices started acting possessed. The best part? Every time it rebooted, it played a short audio file I embedded into the reset cycle, a robotic voice that said, "Network interruption. Please contact your provider." People were furious. Karen sent out a community-wide email, calling it a cyber attack and blaming unnamed hackers. She ordered the HOA to investigate the provider while I sat comfortably on my couch, watching the chaos.